Thank you, Kelly, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. I appreciate the Sheridan Coalition putting this little informational uh, some video together anyway. I'm with Refuge Ministries of North America. It's about a 15-year-old organization that was actually founded in Kalispell, Montana. And I'll talk more about that in a few moments. But I wanted to start a little bit with my own story. And Connie is my wife. And I wanted to share a little bit how we got involved in abuse and dealing with abuse. Most of us probably can say that we have come across abuse in one way or another, either ourselves or a friend, neighbor, a member of our family. It's prevalent enough that that's the case. Well, that was certainly true of us. However, back in 2003, my wife and I and our four children went to Malawi, Africa, to work at a Christian college there as missionaries. And while we were there that first year during Christmas, my best friend that I had developed that friendship during the first semester, he went home to the United States and got married. Brought his wife back in January of that year. And within 2 weeks, the new wife, newlywed, came to Connie and shared some things about their marriage, their very short, recent marriage. And had we known anything about abuse, we would have seen all sorts of red flags about abuse in that relationship. But rather, both Connie and I advised her that, well, you made your bed. You need to hang in there. You need to work hard at marriage. You know, we all have struggles in marriages, and you're just going to have to hang in there. And so that was that. Well, it was about 12 years later, actually 10 years later, that we started realizing that we had abusive leadership in the mission. So we had American leaders of the college who were quite abusive. And that was just from a leadership standpoint. And so we were starting to see that, but then Connie's old roommate from college reached out to her and explained that she had been in a 20-year abusive marriage. And she gave us resources, and we started realizing as we looked through these things what abuse is. And we also started realizing that these friends that we had met early on, that he was abusive of her. Well, when we came back to the United States in 2013, we at that point were learning more and more about abuse. I did a doctorate that was dealing with abusive leadership, and we started thinking about this woman and her husband back in Malawi. And we thought we'd love to reach out to her now that we know better, but we didn't know how to do so without bringing attention to that and maybe causing more difficulty for her because we only had an email that was to both of them. Well, in about 2020, I guess it was about 21, she reached out to us. And from that point on, we have spent nearly weekly conversations with her talking about that abuse and helping her as much as we could to get her out. But it was almost like penance for those years. And she told us at that point that she basically had stayed in there for those 20 years because of what we had told her. And so that created a great deal of disappointment in ourselves in that. Well, that's in essence what we really want to be able to do is to help women get out of those situations. And so I want to give you a little bit of the statistics on abuse. Many of you probably know these statistics, but it's very important to realize how prevalent it is in our society. nearly either a fourth or a third, it depends upon who's doing the surveys and what they're including. Women have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime, a fourth to a third. That means for us coming from a church setting, it's true there as well. And we've had a number of abuse cases in our own very small church. 17% of men have experienced that. And I want to point out we almost always use female gender when we talk about it. That doesn't mean that men don't experience it, because they do, both verbal abuse as all the way through physical abuse. And so it is true for them as well. But because women face it much more so, we generally simplify our language to use she and her and such. So that is the purpose for that. So what is domestic abuse? I think this is a great definition, and there's many definitions out there, but I think this brings it all kind of together. A form of oppression in which a person uses certain behavior patterns to control his or her intimate partner because he believes he is entitled. And I highlight those words in there because I want to kind of go through and define those words a little bit and explain them a little bit. So first of all, the oppression. Oppression means to crush or burden someone by the abuse of power or authority. And those are really important terms themselves: to crush or burden, to push down someone else. And we talk about verbal abuse in essence as put downs. We say that. Well, that's basically what oppression is. It's putting them down. And they're doing that because they have the power, they have the authority to do that. It's not necessarily formal authority like a boss or someone who has a title, but it can be informal authority, someone who's respected or older or anything that gives them a sense of authority over another person. But they're able to oppress, they're able to put down because they have the power to do so. And it's behavior patterns. And even though this says behavior patterns, we'll talk about something a little bit more in depth in just a moment. But behavior patterns, it's important to recognize that it's patterns. It's not just a one-off. There's a certain consistency of attitudes and actions that happen within the relationship that are crushing that person. They're putting them down. And so we look for those patterns. People will say, well, I say mean things at times, and I do things that are oppressive to other people at times. And that is true, and it's bad. However, if we turn around and say, but it is wrong and I shouldn't be doing that, then I'm already kind of pointing out that this is kind of a one-off thing. And I may, struggle with that because we all have those kinds of struggles of different sorts, but it's something that's going to be more consistent, and that there isn't really any, what we'd call in Christianity, a repentance, a turning from it. There's not a sense of, I'm wrong in what I'm doing here and I need to stop doing that. There isn't that kind of viewpoint. That crushing and putting down is for control. Those behaviors are intended to control and manipulate the partner. They want to have control over that person, and they are going to manipulate them so that they have control. And that's an important word in it as well. There's a certain hard attitude that we're talking about there, that they want to control the person. And so those outward actions, those behaviors are in order to take control of them. And why do they do that? Why do they want to take control? Because he believes he is inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. They're entitled. That's the big word, entitled. It's about entitlement. And so that is where you see it in leadership abuse, you see it in the home, you see it even between friends where there's abusive behavior. I've seen friends who had a certain authority because they were very special to the person and maybe they saw them as a mentor or something like that. Same kind of thing, that they felt entitled and they would control and manipulate the person so that they could get what they want. They feel they deserve privilege. They believe they deserve special treatment. And so there you get to the heart. It's not just behaviors. And that's a very important element, that we can't simply stick them in an anger management class because they blow up periodically or something like that, and basically try to get them to control their behavior. Sure, that's nice if they're not beating on somebody. Yet the problem is it goes to the heart, it goes to their thinking, it goes to what they feel, and that feeling is that entitlement, and that's something that we have to really get to when it comes to abusive actions, and that's what we also have to help women understand when they're being abused, that there is underlying attitudes there, that there has to be something done about that. And generally speaking, you can't fix that. That is something that person has to become convicted of, convinced that they have to change their way. So the Lord is a refuge for the oppressed. This comes from Psalms 9:9, and that is basically the foundational verse for Refuge Ministries. We have based it on that because we believe that God cares deeply for those who are being oppressed, who are being crushed. Abused, that word is not used in the Bible very much, but oppress is used a lot, and it basically means the same thing. And so we believe that we need to be, as a people, looking out for those who are oppressed. Oftentimes, people feel like, hey, we need to work with both equally. We need to make sure that we're helping both equally. I believe a priority. I believe a priority is in helping the woman or the man, whoever is being abused, to be free and helped in the midst of that. They are the ones who so greatly need the help in that. Let me go through just some basics on abuse, and this is just super sketchy, not in a negative way, but just a very simple sketch of what abuse is and what different types are. So, psychological abuse, any non-physical behavior designed to control someone through degradation, humiliation, or fear. And we so often see women when they have been in an abusive relationship, and it'll depend upon how much time they spent in that relationship. But they come out of that oftentimes thinking that they're the worst thing in the world, that they're worthless, they have no gifts, they have no abilities, because that's how the abuser handled them. That's how they controlled them, was making them feel like they were worthless. And if they feel like they're worthless, I can control you and I can get whatever I want out of you. And so psychological abuse is basically that kind of thing. Economic abuse, behavior that controls and dominates a person financially. Again, this is oftentimes, it's rare that it's only economic abuse that someone practices. It usually goes along with psychological abuse. But economic abuse, I've seen multiple women in situations where the husband completely controlled the finances, not because they agreed on that, but because he wants to control. And so he won't give her passwords to the online accounts. He might give her some kind of an allowance or something of that sort. But basically, again, it's controlling. It's keeping them locked up in prison. It's very much like keeping somebody in prison. Spiritual abuse is something that really has not been something that has been talked about until fairly recently, in the last probably 10 to 20 years, that there's been much more of that. And now there's quite a few books out about that. But basically, it's an attempt to use a person's faith to manipulate and control them. And this can be in Christianity, it can be in Judaism, it can be in Hinduism, it can be in Islam. Any religion, it is happening. People are abusive, and when they believe that God is on their side and they can use that to control somebody, then that becomes spiritual abuse. It's not the same thing as teaching them the doctrines of the church or the religion or something of that sort. But when it is being used, and oftentimes and primarily wrongly used to control and manipulate someone, it becomes spiritual abuse. Physical abuse, we usually think of that as abuse on steroids. It's the ramped up abuse. But I want to make a point that every one of these, from psychological, economic, spiritual abuse down to physical abuse, every one of those brings about physical manifestations. And so we talk about PTSD with abuse, and it was discovered many years ago that women who were in abusive relationships showed signs of PTSD at a greater level than even military veterans who were coming home from the war. And so, having lived in the abuse day after day, 24/7 throughout their marriage, brings about physical changes in the person. Their brains are rewired, and that trauma creates all sorts of illnesses and health problems. And I've seen it under leadership abuse, I've seen it in domestic abuse, any of those places, that they are suffering from physical maladies when you're thinking, wonder where that's coming from. And then you find out they have had all this abuse in their past. And so physical abuse is not just the hitting somebody. We can also remember that one of the ways of psychologically abusing them, leading to physical abuse, is somebody who is hurting the woman's animal, their pet, and showing that, hey, if I hurt this animal, I can do that same thing to you. Or punching a hole in the wall. Well, he never hit me, but he punched a hole in the wall. That's showing her that he can do that to her. And that's just a means of controlling and manipulating the person to do what they want them to do for them. With Refuge Ministries, we go through this pattern, and I think it's a very important pattern or a counseling way of bringing healing to a woman that is in abuse. So first thing is, in our support groups, a woman will come into the group, and she may have just been encouraged to come into the group by a friend who basically sees the abuse that the woman's going through, but maybe the woman doesn't really think of it as abuse. And so one of the areas that we work with in that is helping the woman see abuse where there is abuse. And so that they're able to identify it, put a name to it, which is very, very helpful for future healing. And then we want them to achieve safety. We want them to be in a place where they are safe and can move forward with their lives, whether that's getting out of the relationship or things changing in the relationship or a separation or whatever that may be that the woman desires to do. And then we want to see that they find healing in Christ. They start realizing they're a daughter of the King of the universe. They are loved by God very deeply, and God is a refuge for the oppressed. And we want them to see that God is on their side. And so there is healing that is in that process of seeing those things that they've been told the whole time that they're worthless. And then finally, that they can establish new patterns. Women who have come out of abuse oftentimes have a hard time trusting others, understandably. Of course they don't, and we shouldn't expect them to. But that is something for good future relationships. They will need to be able to develop a trust in others, in men, in women, whoever it may be. And so there's that process, and the process of forgiveness that takes time and that they cannot be forced into. It's not something they should be forced into, but to more and more come to forgiveness, not to reconcile necessarily with him. But again, all of these things are up to her and whether she's ready for any of those steps. And we want to give her a voice and give her that agency once again where she makes decisions, not him, because he's been making all the decisions up to that point. So, Refuge Ministries, we started, as I noted at the beginning, in Kalispell, Montana. A pastor there, Shane Waldron, was doing a lot of counseling for women in his church who were in abusive relationships, and so he started a support group for them. He didn't realize at that very beginning point that that's the best way for women to find healing, is to be in a group where they've got support and encouragement and other women's stories to help them process their own story. We do two-day training workshops, and there's going to be one in Plentywood on November 14th and 15th. And basically from, is it 8 to 5, I think? I think that's right. And those 2 days, Sissy Hashley, who is in Kalispell, who's the director of the Refuge there, and she's on the national board for Refuge, is going to do those trainings. She's been doing those trainings for probably 12 years now, somewhere in that vicinity. And so she'll do the training. Anyone is welcome, and it's free, but they do need to know about it. So contacting Joan or Linda, and so find out about that. Make sure to sign up so there's enough materials for them. They can give you more information on that. So right now, I would love to take any questions that any of you have, and if we have any time, I don't know, I may have taken too much time, but would certainly entertain some questions.
Thank you, Kelly. This is Joan. I don't have any questions, but I've been communicating with you for a while. So we really look forward to having Sissy here. Thank you for providing us this. And anybody else with questions?
I had a question. Is this training like this is a training for the trainers essentially so that we can start like a support group in our area for ladies? Or is this
Yes.
like the support group? Okay, that's what I was kind of.
That's exactly right. This is training for, we call them mentors, and generally our mentors are not counselor trained. Some have training in counseling, but we just call them mentors, and so they lead the groups, they lead the talks, the Bible studies, and then also the sharing time. There's always an hour at least of sharing time for the women, and then some time to discuss concepts of abuse of various sorts.
Kelly,
Oh,
you had mentioned at one point, or maybe it was Sissy mentioned, that the first day is a lot in depth of recognizing abuse. And this, can you tell us what happens on the first day and the second day of the training?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. I'm hoping I get it correctly. She does things just very slightly different than maybe Shane does a little bit. There's two trainers generally that we have on the board, but I believe that the first day is almost entirely about recognizing abuse, understanding what it is. It's really an awareness seminar and how you respond to the abuse, how you deal with it, how you, as a person who has a neighbor or something who shares the abuse with you, how you can respond most effectively to them. So that's kind of the first day. So it's more general in the sense of just involved in the awareness of abuse and how you respond. The second day is more training in how you run a support group and how you do those things. Probably more on batterers as well, on the abuser, on how you deal with them as well.
That was my second question. I'm guessing I know the answer, but so this doesn't have to be led by, say, like pastors or people, heads of the church. It could be technically anybody in the community. Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah, ours, the original one, Shane led that group as a man. I think all the rest of the groups, except maybe one out of nine, have been led by women, and they have been, just lay people in the church, generally speaking. And it's been interdenominational. We started in a Presbyterian church, but we have a whole variety of churches that are involved in those support groups around the country.
I'm guessing also, like, is there ongoing mentorship for the mentors, like essentially like resources and check-ins and things like that as well? Okay.
Yeah, yes, we have two regional directors. One of them is Sissy. She's in the Western United States, and then we have one on the East Coast. And they check on the various chapters. Whoever directs those chapters, we try to provide resources. We ran a seminar here in Lander, Wyoming. That's where I am. We ran a seminar here with Rachel Denhollander and Darby Strickland uh, uh, about 3 years ago, and we ran that as a live stream for all the other refuges as well. And so they got involved in that seminar, and so we try to provide those kinds of things and information that comes up and stories to help each other out. Yeah. Any other questions there?
I don't see any questions in the chat. If there are no more questions, if you have questions that you think of later, you can always send me an email and I can forward that on to Kelly.
Yeah, and if you want, you can share with them. Yeah, you can share with them my email as well. If anybody'd like to send a question or wants to discuss something, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. I will send your information out in an email to everybody who participated and this recording. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of you being involved in this.